Hi, and welcome back to Finding Out with Annie G, a podcast in which one, I learn how to podcast, and two, uh, deep dive into my many rabbit holes. This will be my first proper solo episode. One of the things that had been sort of holding me back from recording another episode after taking a crack at it the first time was that I didn't have really anyone lined up to do this with, and sitting and talking for an hour sounded kind of intimidating. But something did happen that seemed worth going into or elucidating on, and that would be it is the 3-year anniversary of when I purchased my house. And considering I find it a little bit of a novelty that I even own a house in the first place, it seemed like something that other people might want to hear about the realities of it. What was my underlying motivations? What challenges did I run into, and so forth. I was hoping that it would be helpful to kind of explore the idea of what it's like to be on that millennial with a mortgage squad. Um, because the real estate market now is bananas, but it didn't feel not bananas in 2019 when I started shopping for a house. Austin is not cheap. It was not cheap then. It's not cheap now. It's less cheap now. But there was a lot to go into it. But I spent the first 14 years or so of my adult existence. Maybe I don't even want to do the math on how many years it was. But from the time I got out of my mom's house when I was 18 until 3 years ago, I lived in a series of rentals and properties owned by other people. And I always felt like an inherent instability in being at the behest of another person, like the whims of the landlord. The rent goes up. They may or may not fix things. You're kind of always at the behest of another person because you don't own this place. And there was, always a million small points of contention that prevented me from feeling this sense of rootedness in place. One is that you can't just do whatever the hell you want in a rental. You can't just decide I want to get a dog and then go get a dog. There might be pet rent. They might not want to have a dog of a certain breed. You might already have a cat and they're like, no, you only get the one pet. Um, Not to say nothing of pet rent. What a fucking scam that is. Worrying about the landlords fabricating damage because they know you have a dog and then taking it out of your regular deposit rather than taking it out of the extra pet deposit that you also have to pay, and having almost no transparency into what that deposit is actually for, and it's non-refundable. Um, I also kind of resented the inability to freely modify my living space. And, paint a wall if I feel like painting a wall, or changing something up, hanging up a picture, without stressing about them finding, every tiny little bit of damage that you may or may not have done to the place and charging you for that. Whether or not the place was damage free when you got it. The fact that in a rental you have to walk around before you move any of your stuff in and very carefully note every single ding in the walls, lest your deposit be withheld from you when it's time to move out. All of that felt like bullshit. All of that felt like such bullshit. It's such a scam. And then there's the whole throwing your money down a hole thing that comes with being in a rental, wherein, yes, I have a place to live and that's what I'm paying for, but there's no terminus to it, there's no growth out of it. It's just paying for four walls and a roof for this 30-day period. Um, I never felt a sense of stability. I never felt any sense of ownership over any place I lived when I was in a rental. And I felt restricted in terms of my ability to pursue kind of whatever I wanted to be doing that week in a place that didn't belong to me. And so that was what I was sort of hoping to escape by getting out of the rental cycle. But there's a ton of hesitations and things that freaked me out about it. For one thing, I do not come from money. I come from negative money. I had student debt. I don't have a partner, so I was on a single income. like having savings in the first place was a hard fought battle of its own. And to put all of that, what felt like on the line for the pursuit of owning a house, like, is this a good idea? Oh my God. And then I don't know if this is sort of a chicken egg problem that I experience with the nature of rentals, but something about the fact that a landlord could theoretically like kick you out or something like that gave me this inherent need to always be flexible and always be able to like pick my stuff up and just go, bam, I'm bye, hi, I'm gone. And it gave me this fear of getting pinned down, which is hilarious and backwards. That I was worried about feeling pinned down by owning something, but the reason I never felt safe or secure was because I couldn't own it. It's this weird little mental catch 22. The purchase process for a house is draconian, draconian, and I was terrified of it. And then just this general sense of like, just slow moving terror. But like I did it. I did the thing. I did the scary thing, and I pulled the trigger, and I bought a house. And so when it came to like, how am I a single person with very average finances like going to pull this off by myself? And so like when it came time to do this, like I had to embrace a few facts, one of which is the I do not come from money thing. Like I had student debt, I'm a single income, I don't have a partner or a roommate or anybody going on. I was gonna have to do some like unholy financial shit to make it all go. I was gonna have to take advantage of like first time home buyers assistant and FHA loans with potentially higher interest rates than I was otherwise interested in paying. Like it was gonna be a whole thing, and believe me, like it was. And like I had savings. How did I have savings, you might ask? Well, at the tender age of like 24, I sold out to corporate America. I went and got a job, like boring job, doing tech support. But all of those companies that I was working for had ESPP programs and matching programs and all of this stuff. And so I just kind of bought into those programs and left the money alone for a really long time. So I had like some hard won savings, and it was very scary to just be like, oh my God, it took me all this time to get together like a few $1,000s. Um, I'm gonna spend that money now? What the heck? Um, and so like that was like a real limiting factor, was just the sheer amount of money I don't have. Um, and then there was gonna have to be the part of like finding a place. Thing one, if you're a single person buying your first house, you are not getting a place in a cool area. Like it is not happening, especially if you have any amount of desire for space and a yard. I guess I could have afforded like a condo or something, but I have a zillion animals. Having dogs is like an enormous part of who I am as a person, and so having a good sized yard and relatively few restrictions on an HOA level was really, really important to me. I initially wanted to live somewhere more rural than I actually do live, but I couldn't find something that met my like combination of needs and budget and all the things. Um, Another thing, it was gonna need to be a diamond in the rough. It was gonna need to be a place that when the average person walks into it, their first thought is, "Oh my God, this place needs a ton of work." Like that's what I was looking for, was a place that needed a ton of work. It was gonna need some vision. You're gonna have to be able to see the beauty underneath all of the potential. And I was gonna have to do a bunch of labor myself, and I did. So I come from a family on my dad's side of like multi-generational construction workers. I've been laying flooring and painting houses since I was knee high to a grasshopper. And I'm not necessarily intimidated by swinging a hammer or painting a house. I acknowledge that this is a place where I'm very lucky to have a certain amount of knowledge on my hands and a certain amount of help from my family on a physical manual labor level, so that when it comes time to screw some deck boards in, I'm not necessarily having to pay for the labor, just the materials. And so if I was going to successfully pull this off, like all of those stars had to align as like a place that was like the right price, that had like, you know, enough that it needed to be done to it, that it was kind of sold a little as is, and and that the problems that it needed were either solvable with money and, a relatively limited amount of money, or could be solved with a little sweat equity. So that was kind of the things I had to embrace before I like started shopping for a place. And like then there's the shopping process. Like shopping for a house, it sounds like a blast. Like it sounds like it's going to be the coolest thing ever. You're like dreaming of your future. You're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to have all of this space and I'm going to have my house and it's going to be so cool." And like it is high key miserable. High key miserable. For one thing, I had no idea how fast and loose people are with their dwellings. Like, my house is the most expensive thing I have ever bought, and I am meticulous about it. I am always vacuuming and mopping and dusting and keeping, making sure that I keep like everything nice and tidy and clean. And that is not how everybody rolls. And you do not realize how serious that is till you start looking at strangers' houses, especially ones they're starting to get out of. Um, there is so much driving, so much driving. And with the way that the Austin real estate market works now and worked then, this has not changed at all. One, we have a ton of people moving to this area, and a lot of them are from areas with a higher cost of living. So as soon as something that's going to be worth anything goes on the market, like you are competing. You are submitting offers the day it goes on the market. You are making fast twitch decisions. And you are still competing with other people. When I submitted my offer on this house, I came in here, looked at it with my real estate agent, went, "This is a cool place. I think I would like to make an offer on it." That was the day it went on the market, and I was still competing with like 8 other people. I wrote like a personalized letter to the sellers. I offered a few grand over listing, and this was before the big pandemic caused bubble even went down. But it's like it's hard to find something that has everything you want. Like that Goldilocks scenario is never going to happen. And so the process of buying a house is just this endless series of compromises with yourself. Like in my pie in the sky vision, I was like, I want it to have good access to outdoors things. It needs to be like a reasonable drive to work, and it needs a big yard. And if I could have it, oh my gosh, I'd love to get a gas stove and like a really good shower situation. And like half that stuff didn't happen. I have 25% of the land I was hoping for. I do not live in the part of town that I was initially hoping for. Um, I do not have a gas stove. There's a lot about my house that was a compromise, but it's not in a floodplain. I like the layout. It doesn't have any significant structural issues. The neighborhood seemed all right, and anything it needed done, I could fix myself. It didn't have any serious electrical issues. It didn't have any serious plumbing issues. The foundation was good. And so so when I was shopping, I very rapidly had to learn about the series of compromises that you are going to make with your future if you are serious about making this thing happen, not in a fantasy land, here in reality. And then when you're shopping, there's this whole sense that you are surrounded by a bunch of people who are really invested in parting you from your money, not getting you into necessarily the best situation for you. And like that brings me to the money. Like, dear God, you are writing $1,000 checks like you're ordering a pizza, like inspection, appraisals, deposits, escrow things. There's that one little deposit that you pay like to hold the house before you actually go to the part where you're like officially about to close on it. There's like a whole deposit you have to pay, and it's a lot of money. And as a person that thinks really long and hard before I buy almost anything, it was horrifying to me how fast you can go through $500. Um, Turns out closing costs are based on a percentage of the value of the house. It's a service. It's an identical service. It doesn't matter how much if you're buying $1 million house or a $300,000 house, the process of title and closing is identical for the people executing it, but they charge you based on a percentage of the value of the home. How is that allowed? But they control the process and you have to go through it, so you just have to deal with the closing costs. It is outside the medical system, buying a house is the most draconian purchase process I have ever run across in my life. When you pay a title company to buy a house, they give you like a routing number and you have to wire the money over. And if you make a mistake on that routing number and it somehow goes to the wrong person, that money is not recoverable. There's an entire part of paying thousands of dollars where they're like, please be absolutely certain that you have this information copied down correctly, because if the money is sent to the incorrect person, it will not be recoverable. Like, it is 2019 at the time, it's 2022 now. How is this still the process? Why can't I just Venmo you? It's horrifying. It's absolutely horrifying. And so, like, then you put in a, you find a place and you're putting in an offer and you find yourself like literally praying over the printed listing, just like, please let me get this place. Please end this nightmare. And that brings you to the whole process of like getting it inspected and getting it appraised. And if you find something in the inspection, you're just out that money. Like, bye, gone. And if you do this for more than one house, buy hundreds of dollars that I'll never see again. Bye. Fortunately, I got the first place I put in an offer on. So that was pretty rad. That is not the case for everybody. But it felt like such a luck of the draw when it all came down to it. I had never gotten onto a mortgage before. I had never done any of this, but here I was doing it live. And so like, that was kind of the deal with even just finding a place. It was such a beast of a process. But that brings me to like the house I got. This is my house. If you're watching this on video, I'm sitting in one of the 3 bedrooms of this house. My place was built in the mid '90s. It was built in '96. It is a 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom house. It has a really cool layout. The main room has these enormous, I think, 12-foot ceilings. The master bedroom has 10-foot ceilings in there. It's open concept. It's bigger than it seems. Like, it's way bigger than it seems. The master bedroom, when you walk back there, it goes like the bathroom. There's the bedroom, and then the bathroom, and then the closet is on the other side of it. So it really has this feeling like that I always imagine when I'm reading like a fantasy novel and they refer to like the ladies' chambers. Like, do the chambers, they have more than one room in there, or is that just like a big bedroom? Like, when they have chambers in a palace, like what are the chambers like? But my back bedroom genuinely feels like it's like my chambers, if you will, because it's such a like long sequence of rooms. Um, but like, this place was indeed a diamond in the rough. It was fluorescent yellow. Like, my family called it the banana shack. It was fluorescent yellow with vibrant green trim. Like, it made the John Deere color scheme look subdued. Like, that kind of yellow and green. It didn't have air conditioning. They had been using like a series of window units. Their central air went out at some point in between 1996 and 2019, and they just never replaced it. So it had no air conditioning. It had minor electrical issues. There were like burn marks on one of the walls. It had no appliances. It did not have a washer or dryer. It did not have a fridge. The stove was like 1,000,000 years old. It had all of this like overgrown brush. From what the neighbors used to tell me, there used to be, you could hear like stray cats fighting and mating in the bushes. The first thing I did was tear these bushes out, and I talked to my neighbors later on. They were like, oh yeah, there used to be like a litter of stray kittens in that bush every year. It had the most god awful, we'll gently call them interior design choices. The carpet was original. It was teal green carpet, and the walls were a combination of like harvest orange and mustard yellow. One bedroom had like a giant blue splotch on the wall. They had clearly been like test driving a sky blue, but then never actually painted the bedroom, but never painted over the sky blue splotch that they had put on that bedroom wall. It's that wall right there. This is the room with the sky blue splotch on the wall. The linoleum had a hole in it the size of like easily like a 3 foot across giant hole in the linoleum, and this is a slab foundation. And if you're not from Texas, slab foundation just means like below the flooring there is merely a giant flat piece of concrete. So there were places the foundation was visible. Um, it was a billion colors. It needed so much work. There was just so much that this house needed. But when I walked into it for the first time and the carpet smelled like old dog and there were a million crosses everywhere, the folks that owned it before me used it as a Baptist worship center. And I am not that flavor of religious. It felt like I was in a haunted house. It was freaky and it was a million colors and it smelled like unair conditioned dog in here. It was just a lot to walk into for the first time. But when I did, I looked around and I saw these tall ceilings and I saw this layout and the space that it was on, for all that it was covered in overgrown bushes and trees and had no fence. And I was like, I feel like it has potential. I feel like this house could become something like really cool if I just have the vision to make it real. And I was sitting in this house on the floor and just looking around at it. And I was like, I want this house. I think I want this house. So I got on with my real estate agent and we put in an offer like that night. We put in an offer that night and I wrote a letter and I offered over asking on this god awful fixer upper in Kyle, Texas. And dot, 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 the house became mine. And it's like, once it's yours, houses are really as is. Like once it's yours, like it's sort of like when they let you leave the hospital with your baby. There's no training wheels. There's like congrats, good luck. And that's terrifying. That's a whole lot. Um because I did not buy a fancy house. I bought a cheap shack that needed like a ton of work done to it. And it has some hilarious quirks that are like clearly a consequence of the fact it was built in the mid 90s. Like in my living room, there is a recessed area along one wall that is clearly for an entertainment center. Y'all remember entertainment centers? Like we had one when I was a kid. It's a giant god awful piece of furniture that housed an enormous TV that weighed 1,000,000 pounds. And they used to build houses assuming you'd have one of these things. And you can tell that's what they meant it for because that's where all of the cable routes into, like, that's where all of the internet ports are located. It's just this weird little recessed chunk of the living room where they meant you to put, like, this enormous piece of furniture from rooms to go. And I don't have an entertainment center. I have a flat screen that I wall mount. so, so when you walk around it, you're like, what were they thinking when they put this here? Oh, God. So when I did this, it was like, I'm spending my life savings on this place. I hope it turns out to be a good idea. And it has been. It really has been. But it's been like an absolute shit pile of work in both in both like stuff I've had other people do and then the stuff I've personally done to it. I've personally migrated more towards hiring people to do things over the last little bit here. But a lot of the stuff that's been done to this house, I physically did myself. So it's like, what all have I done to it? Is the better question is like, what haven't I done to this house? Um, I did interior paint and exterior paint. It is no longer highlighter yellow. It is like a nice subdued green because the roof is orange. And so I went to the paint store and I found a bunch of exterior color palettes and I found one where like it had an orange color that sort of matched the color the roof already was and I just chose that, like the main color and the trim color based on that. But then I realized I kind of inadvertently painted this place camo. So I have a camouflage house. That's how it goes sometimes. Um the interior is really like neutral gray. I completely tore out every stitch of flooring, carpet, everything that was in this place, and completely redid the floors. Go waterproof vinyl. If you have pets, especially a big drooly dog, cannot say enough good things about luxury vinyl plank because it is waterproof. So when my dog walks around trailing his mouth rivers of grossness from his water bowl, it doesn't damage my floors and it's really easy to keep clean. I can sanitize it. Go vinyl flooring. So interior paint, I did exterior paint, I did the flooring. The front walkway has kind of a deck leading up to it, so I completely replaced all the deck boards, added a safety rail, tore out all of the overgrown brush. I finished the fence, and when I say I finished the fence, it had like kind of 3/4 of a fence, and I wanted like a completely fenced in yard, like a person with dogs. But when I say I finished a fence, I don't mean like I hired somebody. I mean like I was running a nail gun in 100-degree weather. Um, I built that fence. Every time I look at it, I see my mistakes. I replaced almost every appliance a house could possibly have. I bought a fridge, a washer, a dryer. I added a new stove oven combo jazz to it. I replaced the water heater, got a dishwasher, put in a garbage disposal. I do still actually have the ancient original microwave that is still broken hanging over the stove. That's my one of my next like little projects is to fix the microwave because I have an old useless microwave that I'm not using. It's hanging over the stove. It's broken. Doesn't work. Um, I changed out all the light fixtures. I added recessed lighting. What haven't I done to this place? I added a new kitchen sink and a faucet. All of the light fixtures. I added ceiling fans to all of the rooms, especially the ones that didn't have ceiling fans. So now they're nice and quiet. They don't squeak. And somehow, like the most oddly symbolic thing that I changed out of everything I've done to this joint was the interior doorknobs. I changed out every single doorknob in this house, and I don't know if you've ever gone around your house and counted how many interior doorknobs you have, but it turns out there's more than you think. It's something like 15 doorknobs in this house, and when I replaced the doorknobs, the day I did this was when I was like wrapping up. Hello, cat. The day I did this was when I was wrapping up the primary initial renovation. Hi, cat. Bye, cat. No, cat. I will not feed you now. Um, I did have the floors done by someone else. I did not want to do flooring. It is a very precise job. Flooring is expensive. It requires a lot of teeny tiny little cuts and very precise measurements to do right. And so I felt like hiring someone to do the flooring in this place was the way to go. But when all that was said and done, I walked in and my dad and my sister and I had done all the interior paint and the floors were done. And then it came time to come in and swap out all of the doorknobs. And I was hungover as shit that day. Like, deathly hungover in this place. But I was like standing in my home that was mine and it was finally move-in ready. It was like, it wasn't a shack anymore. It was like a house I was going to live in. Um, and I changed out all the doorknobs just in this place by myself, really hungover. And it so like somehow that action of just like the finishing touches, like it was like it's mine. It's like it's mine. It's real. I get to live here now. Um, and I do. I do genuinely live here like a person who owns a house. It's bananas. And it's like it never fail like I hope I never lose the feeling of it being a novelty because I feel like when you lose that sense of gratitude, it's kind of like you forgot your roots. Like you'll never like I'm a person, you'll never catch me being mean to a waiter. I waited tables from the time I was 16 till I was like 23 or 24 years old. I had like a solid 7, 8 year career in food service and retail before I ever touched an office job, and you will never catch me being mean to somebody who's just trying to get through their day slinging pizzas or whatever. And owning a house, I hope I never lose the sense of like gratitude and good fortune for the fact that this house exists and that I get to live in it and own it, because it feels like it would be forgetting my roots in, like, there was a year right before I moved into the apartment. Well, I guess it was, no, 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 no. Including the apartment I lived in before I bought this place, I changed addresses 4 times in a year and a half. 4 times. I moved out of my place on the north side, into a friend of mine's spare bedroom, and then I was there for like 7, 8 months, and that's kind of it's a whole other story. And that kind of bottom kind of fell out from under that living situation. So I spent a month in my sister's spare bedroom and went and found an apartment. And, in what was it, like 3, 4 weeks in between like signing on the apartment and then moving into it. That's when I was at my sister's. And then I was in that apartment for 9 months. And then I bought this house. Bam. Did the thing. Um, that's a lot of moving around. And then all of a sudden I have been stable for years. And I hope I never lose the sense of gratitude for getting to experience this way of living for myself and on my own. Because I do live alone. I don't have a roommate. I don't have a boyfriend or a husband. There's nobody else here but me. If something needs done, it's me. But like that is very much the reality of owning a house at the end of the day. Whether I had a partner or not, the nature of owning a house is like, if it needs to be done, you are handling it. There ain't no landlord to call. Leaky shower, congrats. You need to go find a plumber, and you better hope he's good at his job, because if you hire a bad plumber, you're not getting the money back from them. You are still going to have a leaky shower, and you're going to be out $500 for the pleasure. So you got to find like good people to work with. Um and like, yes, you get to do everything to your standard, but you have to do it, and that blows sometimes. And like the maintenance of it all, like, buy a house, they said, it'll be fun, they said. This past 2 weeks, really, because it has taken 2 weeks as a problem goes to resolve. I had one of the major selling points of this place actually was the tree that I just recently cut down. And the reason that I cut it down is because in the legendary 2021 ice storm that took out the power in Texas for the better part of a week, my favorite shade tree was one of the casualties of that ice storm. And I left it be to see if it would come back, and it never did. And so I had a gigantic shade tree in my yard, basically just waiting for a bad storm to knock it down. So I hired some people to come out and cut it down. And I don't know if you've ever priced out having a tree cut down, but it is in the thousands of dollars to have a tree cut down and then hauled away. It is bafflingly expensive considering how many hours they're out there. I know that it's like a complicated job with a ton of like physical danger involved, and it's a ton of manual labor and all that, but like, dang, it seems like they're out there 4 hours and you're out like $1,500 quick as you can blink. Did you know that air conditioners need annual servicing if you expect them to continue to work properly in like the really hot weather? And then property taxes. So, one of the fun things about the state of Texas, if you're either not from here or you've never been here or you're considering moving here, this is probably something you should know. Everybody talks about how cheap the cost of living is here. And it's okay. We don't have a state income tax. So, once you're past health insurance and federal taxes and whatever you're putting into retirement, that's your paycheck. We don't have a state income tax. But what we do have are variable, very intense property taxes. So something like $700 a month out of my mortgage payment is property taxes. And when they appraise your house, when the county comes around and appraises your house every year, and if they say the value has gone up, and it always does, um, your mortgage goes up, your mortgage payment. It's like your rent goes up, except the government did it to you. And like, not that I resent paying taxes. I like having roads and public services and all of the good things in the world. But dear Lord, the property taxes of the state of Texas are a whole lot. And like, another intimidating thing about houses is like, there's so much you can accidentally do wrong just because you're not a technician when you're dealing with salespeople. Most people who sell you things for houses are some kind of commission based or directly paid based on the amount of money you spend. And so, like, the old if I had it to do over again syndrome is so real. Like, you are never going to be 1,000% satisfied with your choices in a house unless you have the money to swap that thing out. For me, my if I had it to do over agains would be the color of these floors in the main room, the vinyl, and the size of the air conditioner I had installed. I did not really understand the tonnage system of measurement when it comes to air conditioners, and so the one that I have installed on this house is honestly a little underpowered for the amount of square footage I'm trying to cool, especially in the deep parts of summer. My sister, who is a professional in the construction industry, has a very powerful air conditioner, and her house is absolutely never warm in the summer. Mine gets hot. Um, and also in like the if I had it to do over again, as I mentioned that vinyl floor, I chose like a dark kind of teak wood color, which looks frickin' sick when it's clean. It looks so good when it's clean, but much like a black truck, it shows every thought a speck of dirt ever had about resting on it. It gets dirty so easily. I spend my entire life mopping up paw prints off that dark color. And if it were like a lighter gray color, yes, that would be very boring, but it does cover the need to keep it super duper clean way better than the color that I have. But it's like you can't know till you try kind of deal, and it's fucking around and finding out, man. You got to fuck around to find out, and that's how she goes. Um, and there's also like the other thing that will always, I think, happen no matter how much you love your house is because the process of house shopping is such an exercise in compromises. There is always going to be this sense of like, what if I had blah thing, like I would love to have something like a little bit more walking distance to my house, just like a corner store or something that I could walk to for beer. I wish I had a gas stove. And like the way my house is laid out is like to get to the front door, you have to like come around the whole side of it on the right. And so like to get to my front door, you are like well on the property. And that's cool. Doesn't seem to stop the door-to-door sales guys. I do think it's kind of nice that I don't have a legit front door, but that also means I don't have a front porch. And when you're, one of these people like me that's like, oh, I'm going to have a cute jack-o'-lantern and I want to have like a rocking chair or something. I don't have a front porch to put a jack-o'-lantern or a rocking chair on. It's really hard to have curb appeal in a home that doesn't have a front door. Uh, and so there's always this like collection of compromises and things that you're going to just be like, yeah, well, if I only had it to do over, if only the universe were more perfect than it is. But like owning a house has given me this bananas sense of stability. And like I bought my house in 2019. And considering I moved into it in June. So right around now, 3 years ago, I was in the middle of the renovation process. And then about 9 months later, the damnedest thing happened. A little upstart virus from a faraway land became, the heavy hitter of 2020, and all of a sudden it was pandemic time. Now, when I bought my house, I live in Kyle, Texas, which means I live well outside the city of Austin. I'm technically in a different county. I'm in Hayes County. And when I bought my house, I had an in-office job in the middle of downtown Austin. I work in tech, and consequently, I have a lot of what I'll call like super urban coworkers. And they were like, what in the world are you doing moving all the way out there? Like, can't you buy something a little smaller that's a little closer? And they, like at the time, they super had a point. But then the damnedest thing happened, and we were all trapped in our houses for like 8 months. And all of a sudden, I, your humble host, was doing so in a house that was actually large enough that it felt like my little cage, my little habitat was large enough to help keep me from going nuts. I had dedicated outdoor space. My yard is the size of a small city park, and I had it all to myself so I could go outside and just experience bird song without it being like a whole production in the middle of like deep quarantine. Um I also have like this relentless creative streak, and being stuck in my house for so much of the last 2.5 years or however long it's been now that we've been in pandemic times. I've ended up like really creating like a ton of little spaces to just be. Like I have a full-blown barbell lifting setup in my garage, which is probably going to be the subject of its own podcast. Garage gyms are cool, and I built mine as a response to the gyms being closed. I also just don't like sharing the squat rack or waiting on so and so to get done with what they're doing. Um, I like to kind of get in, get my workout done, and get out of there. But I also just love the freedom to hang out in there for a few hours and just tinker. I've built like a little reading nook in my bedroom. It's just like a chair and two wall-mounted lamps and a nightstand there with like a little tray and some candles and whatever. And like, yes, I could have done that in an apartment. There's nothing stopping you from putting a reading nook in an apartment. But having my own place has really let me go nuts, if you will, on the sense that I'm gonna be sticking around here for a while, and there's no reason to avoid having all that stuff. When I was in apartments, I eternally lived life like at the end of this lease, I might move out of here. Um, and often did. But now that I own this place, like the prospect of selling it is just as terrifying to me as the initial prospect was of buying it. Um, and so I am going to stick around for a while, and that sense of stability, like, definitely lends itself to feeling free to really nest in it. I will say, though, one weird, unexpected downside of owning a place where its current appraised value is so much more than what I paid for it has created this odd little golden handcuff situation where I can't imagine where I'd move where my living situation would be this combination of awesome and affordable. Like I'm a little locked in. The pin down thing that I was afraid of has manifested itself into reality. I just find that I'm less mad about it than I thought I'd be. Another thing like I've kind of had to have a come to Jesus with, if you will, is like the acknowledging like the never ending nature of it. There's always something I kind of want to be doing to it, and everything I want to do to it is like $5,000. You want to remodel a kitchen? You better work, bitch. You want to build a patio? You better work, bitch. It's like everything is $5,000. Um, and there's this infinite nature of options. Like I have no idea how I want to redo that kitchen. I'm pretty sure I want quartz countertops. From what I gather, that's the way to go. Um, I don't think I necessarily need to install new cabinets. I think I just need to refinish the ones I have. But all of that is on the table. It's like, how much do you want to spend? Um, I'd love to build like my dream patio. So the house is situated dead in the center of the property. And so both my front yard and my backyard are kind of U-shaped, if you will. Um, that means that there's a certain amount of dead space in that yard that never really sees usage, and then certain areas which see all the usage in the universe. And I have this dream of like that one of those all the usage spaces, it has been worn down to utter dust by the fact that I'm always over there training my dogs and hanging out in this one given space. And I'd love to have a proper patio there with like a shade structure. And like, oh my God, you know what I could do with the shade structure is I could put in like those cool ass bistro lights like they have at every cute coffee bar, patio bar I've ever been to. And I could put in those mister thingies with a fan. It would be so rad because it's like 1,000,000,000 degrees out there right now. And like, these are the things I dream about as a homeowner. And like, can I afford it right now? No. I spent all my money training my dog. Patios are for later on. But the possibilities are just always like lurking at you a little bit. And so like owning a house, like 10 out of 10 can recommend, like if you can find a place that meets any of your needs and you have the budget, like if what it is fear that's holding you back, I can assure you that that is extremely valid, but you should trust try and pull that trigger and get out of the rental cycle if you can. Like for me it's been a really transformative experience, not just financially, even though like I must admit this has turned into the greatest thing I ever did for myself financially, because all of a sudden like I have a net worth. I always thought it would be way more likely that I'd find myself living in a sprinter van down by the river than being like a homeowner. And yet here I am, a homeowner with a net worth. Like Jeeves, do bring me my finest teas. I feel like I feel like Lord of the Manor over here. It's not true, but I do. Um, and then I have this like beautiful sense of stability and the ability to dream about what I want to turn it into. And like I have pack bonded with this house. Like I will pack bond with nearly anything I spend enough time around, but I have pack bonded with my little home. And so it's been this like bananas wild ride of like learning how to adult and like also simultaneously getting to express my most bananas desires in a space. Um, it was like intimidating as hell to think like, hell yeah, I'm gonna go buy a house. I'm gonna have me some land so I can have all these dogs. And then there's the reality of like, oh shit, this place doesn't have an air conditioner. Um, like those are two very disparate ideas related to one very unified thing. But I'm like super grateful that I've gone through this process and like I get to have a house. So that's kind of all the thoughts I had on it that I wanted to share. And I just kind of wanted to wish me and the house like a happy anniversary. And I hope this helped someone. I hope that you like, if you've ever wondered what it'd be like to genuinely do the thing and buy a house, from the perspective of somebody that might like didn't have anybody else's money to do it with. This has been my experience of it, and I just really hope everybody takes something from it. So, I think that about wraps it up. Here we are at what is this? 46 minutes? I did it. I recorded a solo episode and I had genuinely had something to say. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate y'all joining me. And, just always be fucking around and finding out, and I'll catch you on the flip side.